Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're pulling back the curtain on an industry that literally touches almost every single part of our daily lives, yet its massive financial machinery operates mostly out of sight. When you see a commercial convoy cruising down the highway, or a massive farming operation in full swing, it's really not just about dirt, diesel, and steel. No, it is a high-stakes, multi-million-dollar financial chess match. So let's uncover the heavy metal finance strategies that are going to completely change how you view these everyday machines.
Okay, let's dive into this. 513,900 Canadian dollars. Now, that is not the price of a sprawling luxury home or some fleet of sports cars. That is actually the sticker price for a single 2025 Case IH Mag 325 tractor listed at Rocky Mountain Equipment over in Brandon, Manitoba. When we're talking about modern agricultural and commercial machinery, we are talking about absolutely staggering, eye-watering capital investments. Just imagine running a business where a single piece of your everyday toolkit costs over $500,000.
Section 1. The cost of heavy metal. Now, with price tags like that, the real-world stakes for operators carrying these massive investments are just incredibly high.
To understand what happens when the financial burden of these multi-million-dollar fleets collides with tough operational realities, we just have to look at the objective facts. What we have here is an actual affidavit filed in the Court of King's Bench of Alberta back in April 2026 for the Monette Farms Group. They're a massive agricultural entity made up of numerous corporations and limited partnerships all across North America. And this document, it represents exactly what happens when the immense financial pressure of carrying colossal equipment costs finally reaches a breaking point.
Because when debt and operational liabilities become entirely unsustainable, massive entities like Monette Farms are forced to seek legal shelter. So they applied for an initial order under the Companies Creditors Arrangement Act, or CCAA. This essentially hits the pause button. It stays all claims and proceedings against the company, which allows them to bring in a court-appointed monitor, in this specific case FTI Consulting. The monitor steps in to help restructure their financial affairs, keep the status quo, and pursue asset dispositions while providing some much-needed liquidity. It's essentially a financial lifeline for when the weight of all that heavy metal just becomes too much to bear.
Which brings us to Section 2, to lease or to buy. To avoid that kind of financial collapse, business owners really have to play a strategic game of chess when deciding how to actually acquire their fleets.
Just picture this incredible machine, a massive combine harvester working the fields. Now, put yourself in the operator's shoes. How do you put this to work for you without completely sinking your business? Do you buy it outright to build long-term equity, or do you lease it to preserve your working capital for other absolutely vital investments like land or seed?
And this brilliantly illustrates the heart of that exact dilemma. The Manitoba government lays out these critical trade-offs pretty clearly. If you own the equipment, well, yes, you're using up your available cash flow or taking on a commercial loan, but you're building equity. Plus, you get to claim operating expenses, interest, and crucially, depreciation on your taxes. On the flip side, leasing preserves that precious working capital. It gives you instant access to newer, more reliable equipment without that massive upfront drain. Now, while you don't build any equity because the leasing company still owns it, those lease payments can often be written off against the income earned by the farming operation. It is a super delicate balancing act between having cash on hand right now versus building long-term value.
Moving on to Section 3, financing the fleet. For those who decide that yes, acquiring the asset outright is definitely the right move, let's explore the financing solutions that actually keep them moving.
Here is the reality check. In the commercial truck and equipment market, your credit score absolutely dictates your reality. Interest rates can bounce anywhere from 6% to 12% depending on your profile. But the real shocker is how the down payments shift so dramatically based on risk. If you have excellent to good credit, which usually means a score above 650, you are looking at around a 10% down payment. Not bad. But if your credit is fair or poor, say under 600, lenders might suddenly ask for 20 to 30% down. And if you're a brand new startup, you can expect to hand over at least 25% just to get the keys.
And those startup numbers highlight the very real hurdles that first-time buyers are up against. Traditional banks, they often won't even look your way unless you have 2 or more years of operating history. Talk about a catch-22, right? You need a truck to build history, but you need history to buy the truck. That is exactly where independent lenders come into play. They look at the actual value of the truck, though they'll still require that hefty 15 to 25% down payment. But here is the absolute secret weapon, a signed hauling contract, or a letter of intent from a client. Proving you have guaranteed revenue tied to that specific machine massively boosts your approval odds, because it proves to the lender that the truck is actually going to pay for itself.
Section 4. The hidden tax realities. Because acquiring the equipment is really only half the battle. Next, you have to navigate this hidden maze of strict, and let's be honest, sometimes really confusing tax codes.
So, the crucial point is understanding exactly how the government views your equipment. Under the Manitoba retail sales tax rules, there is a very hard line drawn between renting equipment and providing a service, and it all hinges on one single thing: the operator. If you supply a piece of equipment to a customer and they operate it themselves, well, that's a rental. Simple. But if you provide the equipment and you send an operator along to control its functions, like sending an earth-moving machine driven by one of your own employees, you are no longer renting equipment, you are providing a service.
Now, notice how the presence of that single operator completely flips the tax liability upside down. It's wild. If it is a rental without an operator, you just collect the 7% retail sales tax on the total invoice you hand your customer. Done. But if you provide the operator, making it a service, you actually do not collect RST from your customer. Instead, you, as the supplier, are considered the ultimate consumer of that equipment. That means you have to pay the RST when you purchase or lease the machine, and you also pay it on any repairs or supplies for it down the line.
And the rules get even more specific when equipment crosses borders. Imagine an out-of-province business bringing heavy machinery into Manitoba temporarily just to perform a service. You would naturally think they'd have to pay tax immediately, right? Actually, scratch that. The rule explicitly states that no tax is payable on the temporary use of equipment in Manitoba unless it remains there for a total of 6 or more days in a calendar year. It's this fascinating little loophole that logistics and construction companies absolutely have to track meticulously.
Which leads us to Section 5, Creative Cash Flow Solutions. Okay, so what happens when a business has done everything right, but suddenly they hit a rough patch and need cash fast just to survive? They pull out a creative rescue move. Listen to this brilliant strategy from Falcon Leasing out of Winnipeg. Their goal is to help businesses, and I quote, unlock the money available in your equipment assets without needing to sell that equipment. Think about that for a second. If your capital is entirely tied up in heavy metal, how on earth do you get cash without losing the very tools you need to do the actual work?
Let's move to the mechanics and see how this builds into an absolutely ingenious maneuver known as the lease buyback. Here's the step-by-step breakdown. First, the business takes a piece of equipment they fully own and they sell it to a leasing company for a lump sum of cash. Second, that equipment gets totally cleared of any creditor claims or liens. Third, and this is where the magic happens, the leasing company leases that exact same piece of equipment right back to the business. The day-to-day operation is never disrupted. The machine literally never even leaves the yard. But suddenly, the business has this massive injection of cash to reduce operational costs, handle an emergency, or even finance new purchases, all while gaining the tax advantages of a lease.
Which really brings us to the ultimate question. When you look at a combine harvester, a day cab semi-truck, or a massive excavator, are you just looking at heavy vehicles? Or are you really looking at rolling financial portfolios? From those staggering $500,000 purchase prices and CCA bankruptcy protections, all the way to strategic tax maneuvering and those ingenious lease buybacks, the heavy equipment industry is truly a masterclass in high-stakes finance. I guarantee the next time you pass a tractor on the highway, you'll know exactly what kind of game is really being played. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep your eyes open out there.